In this podcast episode, I want to talk about what I consider to be one of the more under-discussed causes of procrastination. Welcome to Grow With Intention, the podcast for people who want to create a life that feels good. When it comes to procrastination and productivity struggles, for some reason, everyone talks about perfectionism. There's pretty strong messaging out there that if you procrastinate, you might be a perfectionist, but they've actually studied this. They've found that perfectionists are less likely to procrastinate than non-perfectionists. People who cross their T's and dot their I's are not dilly-dallying. But there are two other common things that you'll see in people that struggle with procrastinating. Firstly, all or nothing thinking when it comes to your tasks. So an example of this is when I was at a friend's a while ago, she was talking about decluttering. But the idea of doing just a little bit of decluttering here and there, maybe even like a little bit every day, felt really pointless to her. So she found herself putting off decluttering completely, because she didn't feel like she had the time or energy or space to declutter all in one go. Her mind was in all or nothing thinking mode. Her options, according to her brain, were either she did a full-on declutter, she cleared out her whole life, or she did nothing. The second thing that you'll often see in people that struggle with productivity is impulsivity, which just means that you do without thinking. In the book, The Procrastination Equation, they actually talk about how impulsivity is one of the most common traits in people who struggle with procrastination. There's a strong, noticeable link between impulsivity and productivity struggles. In my head, all or nothing thinking and impulsivity go really hand in hand. And in this podcast episode, I want to talk about how you can identify if you are someone who struggles with these things and what to do about it. So to start off, you know that you struggle with all or nothing thinking if you feel like everything is a heavy lift. You're not really someone who does like little reps here or there. And I'm not talking about reps in the gym. I'm talking about little reps in terms of like little chunks of tasks. Instead, everything feels like it's this big push that you have to get yourself to do and do it in full. Another sign that you struggle with all or nothing thinking is that most of your to-do list is full of mini projects instead of tasks. People with all or nothing thinking often think in terms of mini projects instead of tasks. It's a subtle form of self-sabotage. So a task would be write out a list of meals that I want to eat this week. That'll probably take you like 20 minutes or so. A mini project is meal prep, which contains a bunch of different subtasks. It'll take hours to do all of the steps that exist under meal prep. And usually it'll be done across a few days. One day you might plan your meals, the next day you might grocery shop, etc., etc. Another sign that you struggle with all or nothing thinking is that when you try to adopt habits, you have a lot of difficulty with not going all out. So you've probably heard those ideas of like, well, just start out by flossing one tooth. And maybe you've even tried it, but you've gone, this is pointless. Your all or nothing thinking pathways light up, and instead of doing just a little small thing, your brain pushes you towards nothing. Another sign is that if you have a problem in your life, you either are doing nothing about it and kind of in avoidance mode, or you slip into, okay, I have a problem. I'm going to take a drastic action to solve this problem. Rarely do you think, what is a little tiny step that I could take to move forward from this problem today? And the last sign that you struggle with all or nothing thinking and also impulsivity, all of these are kind of both of them hand in hand. You often find yourself pushing through tasks to get them done in their entirety. I actually think of this as a bit of a consent issue. It sounds extreme, but if you are constantly pushing yourself to do things above and beyond without any breaks, and through that process, you're disregarding any of your body signals that are saying like, hey, you need to stop, you need to take a break, you need some water, you need some food, you need to go to the bathroom. If you have ADHD, that's something that you would probably struggle with. It makes sense that you struggle with procrastination because of course your body is going to go like, oh, hey, every time we go to do something, we end up taking things too far. We end up not listening to our body's signals. It's always this one big heavy lift. It's never these tiny little reps. Of course, your body is going to start to reject getting things done. Of course, it's going to go like, why would I want to do that? That always leads me into not being in control, not being able to rest, not being able to break. So if you find yourself nodding your head and you're like, yes, I relate to these things, now what? What can we do about it? There's so much that can be done, but in this podcast episode, I'm just going to talk about 2 steps that you can take that will make a big difference if you are on struggle street when it comes to getting things done and procrastination. Number 1, super simple, is to only put 20 to 30 minute tasks on your to-do list. This is about helping you to build the habit of taking on small reps rather than big, heavy lifts. The way that I do this is I have my little list of projects in Notion. So anything that is multi-step, anything that's pretty much over 30 minutes is a project. For example, this podcast episode, a project, not a task. Then I have my task list, and on my task list, I only ever put 20 to 30 minute tasks that move me towards completing my projects. This is very getting things done, David Allen-esque. I always make sure that all of my projects have at least one 20 to 30 minute task. When you habitually start working in this way, you will get used to taking small chunks. You are no longer trying to eat the whole elephant. The worst analogy, you're taking a bite at a time. If you're listening to this and you're like, wow, it'd be really good if I had a pre-set up Notion system that really guided me through this, I created it for you, the Calm Productivity Notion pack. I won't bang on about it for too long. The sales page does the talking. It's so beautiful. It's very much geared towards anyone who wants to take a calm, gentle approach to productivity. I'll have a link to buy the Calm Productivity Notion pack in the show notes below. And the second little habit to embrace in your life is going to sound so simple, and you'll hear it, you'll be like, well, that's not interesting. But if you actually start doing it, I think it can be a lot more life-changing than many of the productivity tips that are out there. And that is to pause once an hour. I really like the STOP framework, which I only recently found out is from DBT. So S is for stop. So physically, you actually want to pause yourself. This in and of itself can be really hard if you have productivity struggles, and you'll find when you try it, you'll be like, oh, this is challenging, because you often get swept up in whatever you're doing, even if that is just scrolling or you're deep in the middle of a work project. Just getting yourself to pause, take a breather, and move to the next step, which is to take a step back, is actually quite challenging. The next step is to observe. So observe what's happening around you, but also what's happening within you. The more that you do this, the more that you'll start to recognize patterns of impulsivity, of getting swept up in your thoughts, of all or nothing thinking. Because you will catch yourself mid all or nothing thinking. You'll catch yourself mid impulsive urge to do something that isn't a priority. So alongside observing, you want to ask yourself, what are my goals? How do I feel right now? Do I need a break? Do I need to slow down? What choice do I need to make right now to make sure that my future self is taken care of? I love that one. And then P is for proceeding mindfully. This sounds like such a simple productivity hack, but for anyone who has ADHD or who just has productivity struggles in general, it's a real exercise in self-control. Something I talk about on my main channel is how my relationship with social media has changed. Ever since I got into the habit of pausing and just asking myself, am I having fun? Actually getting yourself to pause is the hard part. The pausing is also about stopping the impulsivity, because impulsivity is really just a matter of not thinking about what you are doing and just doing. When you pause and you're mindful and you're like, okay, what are my priorities? Future self. Let's think of her, they, them. Now let's talk Recs of the week. The first recommendation, the procrastination equation, which is something that I talked about at the start of this podcast episode. This is where they talk a lot about the research behind personality traits that exist behind procrastination. I still want to say that I consider impulsivity to be a state. I don't like to think of it as an unchangeable trait. Impulsivity is absolutely something that you can decrease through things like pausing. So don't let yourself read that kind of research and then feel helpless. Neuroplasticity is a thing. It is possible for you to change your brain. The second recommendation is David Maloney's YouTube channel. This is like a little secret niche hidden gem that I really love. If you have struggled with procrastination, David Maloney just has interesting alternative insights when it comes to procrastination. He also has a book called Procrastination Decoded that I will have linked in the show notes too. If you enjoyed this podcast episode, I have a podcast episode that's all about the marble mentality, which is an approach to habits that doesn't require rigidity. It doesn't require streaks and don't break the chain energy, that really resonates a little bit more with someone who's pro flexibility. I'm going to have that linked on the screen if you're on YouTube, as well as in the show notes if you're on Spotify, in the description if you're on YouTube. I appreciate you so much, and I'll see you in the next episode.